The space station called Arcturus Prime floated near a neutron star. It was huge and made of metal that shined under the distant lights. This place was special. It was the Galactic Military Academy, where soldiers from all over the galaxy came to train. The station had been there for hundreds of years, and thousands of alien species had walked through its halls. On this particular morning, the training facility was busy as usual. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the corridors. Some had 4 arms, some had 6 legs, and others had skin made of crystal or metal. They all wore the gray uniforms of military cadets. Lieutenant Commander Vexthor stood near the main docking bay. He was a Krillian, which meant he was very tall and very strong. His body was covered in natural armor that looked like thick plates. He had 4 arms, each one powerful enough to bend steel. His species had been warriors for thousands of years, and everyone respected them. Next to him stood Captain Zin. He was a Sithrak, which meant his body was long and snake-like. His skin was covered in green scales, and his tongue flicked in and out when he talked. The Sithrak were known for being fast and deadly. Their bite could kill most creatures in seconds. Both officers were waiting for the new arrivals. They had been told that humans were coming to the academy. Neither of them was happy about it. "I still don't understand why we're wasting time with these humans," Zin said. His voice sounded like metal scraping on metal. "I read their files. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities at all." Vexthor made a sound that was like a grunt. The council decided to give them a chance. Something about fairness and diversity. "But I agree with you. They won't last a week here." A small shuttle appeared in the docking bay. It was plain and simple compared to the huge warships that usually landed there. The shuttle touched down gently and the door opened with a soft hiss. 4 humans stepped out. Vexthor and Zin stared at them. The humans looked even smaller and weaker than their files had suggested. The tallest one was barely 6 feet. They all had soft skin with no protection at all. Their arms looked thin and fragile. The first human to step forward was a young woman. She had brown hair tied back and brown eyes that looked straight ahead. She wore the standard cadet uniform, but it seemed too big for her small frame. She walked up to the 2 officers and raised her hand to her forehead in a salute. "Sir, Cadet Amy Brooks reporting for training," she said. Her voice was clear and steady. "These are Cadets Jake Morrison, Peter Grant, and Kevin Hart." Vexthor looked down at her. His multiple eyes blinked one after another. "So you're the humans. I must say, you're even more disappointing in person than you were on paper." Amy kept her hand in the salute position. "We're here to prove ourselves, sir." "Prove yourselves?" Zin laughed. It was not a nice sound. "Look at you. Your bones are weak. Your skin tears easily. You have no claws, no fangs, no venom. What exactly do you think you can prove?" "We can prove that humans deserve to be here, sir," Amy said. Vexthor walked around the humans slowly. His forearms moved as he examined them from every angle. "Do you know what the minimum strength requirement is for a coalition soldier?" "It's 2,500 units of force." "Do you know what the average human can produce?" "Less than 1,000. You're not even half as strong as the weakest species in our military." Jake, one of the other humans, shifted his weight nervously. Peter and Kevin looked at the ground, but Amy kept looking straight at Vexthor. "We understand that we're different, sir," Amy said. "But different doesn't mean useless." "We'll see about that," Vexthor said. "You're assigned to Training Group 7. Your instructor is Sergeant Drax. He's a Thorian with 30 years of combat experience. I expect you'll quit before the end of the first week." Other cadets had started to gather in the docking bay. They came from different species, but they all had one thing in common. They were all staring at the humans with curiosity and amusement. A tall alien with crystal skin pointed at Amy. "Look how small they are. I could probably break one with my hand." Another alien, this one with 6 legs and multiple eyes, laughed. "My younger brother has more muscle than all 4 of them combined." "I heard humans can't even survive without their special equipment," another voice said. "They need machines just to breathe in most places." Amy heard every word. She felt her jaw tighten, but she didn't respond. She had known this would happen. The reports from human scouts had warned them. Most alien species thought humans were too weak to be soldiers. They thought humans should stick to science and diplomacy. But Amy and her team were here to change that. Earth had fought for years to get this chance. If they failed, no human would ever be allowed in the military again. If they succeeded, they would open doors for generations to come. "Follow the guide drone," Vexthor ordered. It will take you to your training area. Dismissed. A small flying machine appeared and started floating down the corridor. The 4 humans followed it. The hallways were enormous. The ceilings were at least 20 feet high. The doors were huge. Everything was built for creatures much bigger than humans. This is insane, Kevin whispered as they walked. Did you see the size of some of those aliens? That one guy looked like he could pick up a car. That's exactly why we need to be here, Jake said quietly. If we can prove ourselves against them, we prove that humans are serious. Or we get crushed on the first day and become a joke for the rest of galactic history, Peter added. Amy stayed quiet. She had spent 2 years training for this moment. She had studied every major alien species. She knew their strengths and their weaknesses. She had learned their fighting styles and their tactics. But studying something and facing it in person were 2 very different things. The guide drone stopped at a large door. Strange alien writing was on it, but the translation device in Amy's ear told her it said, Training Group 7. Enter. A deep voice called from inside. The door slid open. Beyond it was a massive training room filled with equipment. There were weights that looked like they weighed tons. There were bars for climbing that were 50 feet high. There were weapons hanging on the walls that were bigger than Amy's entire body. In the center of the room stood Sergeant Drax. He was a Thorian, which meant he had 6 legs that ended in sharp points. His body was covered in thick armor plates that looked impossible to break. He had multiple eyes that could look in different directions at the same time. When Drax saw the humans, all of his eyes focused on them at once. So, he said slowly, You're the humans everyone is talking about. I was told to expect something weak and small, but this is worse than I imagined. 12 other cadets were in the training room. They represented 6 different alien species. All of them stopped what they were doing and turned to stare at the humans. Some of them smiled. Others looked confused. A few looked angry that humans were even there. Line up, Drax commanded. His voice was loud and made the floor vibrate. We're going to start with a physical assessment. I need to see exactly how weak you really are. Then we can figure out if there's any point in training you at all. Amy and the others lined up. She could feel dozens of alien eyes watching her. She could hear whispers and quiet laughter. But she kept her back straight and her eyes forward. This was just the beginning. The training room floor was made of a special metal called Durasteel. It was incredibly strong and could handle almost any kind of damage. Sergeant Drax walked to the center of the room. His 6 legs made clicking sounds on the metal floor with each step. Every soldier in the Coalition Defense Force must meet physical standards, Drax announced. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear clearly. It doesn't matter what your job is. You must be able to fight. Today we test your baseline abilities. He pointed to different areas of the training room. We have 4 tests. Strength, endurance, agility, and combat. You'll do all 4. Humans, you go last so I can adjust the equipment to your level. The alien cadets laughed. A huge Krillian named Gorthak laughed the loudest. Adjust it down? Why not just give them toys from a children's center? Even Drax seemed amused. Begin with the strength test. The first cadet was named Vex. He was a Drachnor, which meant his skin was made of living crystal. He walked to a machine that had 2 large handles. The machine measured how much force someone could produce. Vex grabbed the handles and squeezed. His crystal muscles bulged and glowed. The display on the machine showed 4,200 units of force. Acceptable, Drax said, making a note on his datapad. One by one, the other cadets took their turns. The weakest was a scout species called a Quellan. He produced 2,800 units. The strongest was Gorthak, the big Krillian. His 4 arms allowed him to generate 6,100 units of force. Then it was Amy's turn. She walked to the machine. The handles were designed for much larger hands. She positioned herself carefully and took a deep breath. Then she squeezed as hard as she could. The display showed 890 units. The room went completely silent. Then everyone started laughing. 890? Gorthak shouted. My baby sister could do better than that. That's less than 1/3 of the minimum requirement, another cadet called out. Drax walked over and looked at the display. Cadet Brooks, are you sure you used your full strength? Amy felt her face get hot, but she kept her voice calm. Yes, Sergeant. That was my maximum. I see. Drax wrote something on his pad. Move to the next test. Jake, Peter, and Kevin did slightly better. They scored between 950 and 1,100 units. but all of them were still far below the minimum of 2,500 units that was required. The endurance test was next. Each cadet had to run 10 laps around the training room while wearing heavy training gear. The fastest was a Quellan scout who finished in 4 minutes. The Thorian cadets averaged 6 minutes. Even Gorthak, despite his huge size, finished in 7 minutes. Amy finished in 18 minutes. Her lungs burned and her legs felt like rubber. Jake couldn't even finish all 10 laps. He collapsed after 16 and had to stop. Peter and Kevin finished, but they both took more than 20 minutes. "This is pathetic," Drax said. "Your endurance is suitable for sitting at a desk, not fighting in combat." The agility test involved climbing walls, walking on narrow beams, and crawling through tight spaces. Most of the alien species completed it easily. Their natural abilities made the course simple for them. Amy struggled with the climbing wall. The handholds were spaced for creatures with longer arms. She had to find different routes, which added time to her score. The balance beam was easier because she had a lower center of gravity, but the crawling section was designed for 6-legged creatures and was almost impossible for someone with only 2 legs. Her final time was the worst in the group by almost 3 minutes. "Well," Drax said after all the tests were done, "we've confirmed what we already knew. You lack the strength, endurance, and physical abilities needed for military service, but regulations say I must still test your combat skills. Maybe you'll surprise me there." He pointed to a raised platform in the middle of the room. "Now we do combat demonstrations. Each cadet will fight someone of similar rank. Humans, you'll fight each other. I don't want you to die on your first day." More laughter from the other cadets. "Actually, Sergeant," Amy said, "I want to request a different opponent." The laughter stopped immediately. Drax's multiple eyes all turned to look at her. "Explain." "We came here to prove that humans belong in the Coalition Defense Force," Amy said. "Fighting each other doesn't prove anything. I want to fight a regular opponent." "You want to fight a non-human opponent," Drax repeated slowly, "in hand-to-hand combat." "Yes, Sergeant." "You understand that, based on your test results, you'll probably get seriously injured? Broken bones at the very least?" "I understand, Sergeant." Drax was quiet for a long moment. Then his face changed into what might have been a smile. "Very well. Gorthak, you're fighting the human." The massive Krillian stood up. He flexed all 4 of his arms. He was almost 9 feet tall and probably weighed 800 pounds. His armor plates shined under the lights. "I'll try not to hurt the little human too badly," Gorthak said, but his tone suggested he would not be gentle at all. Amy walked to the platform. Her heart was pounding hard in her chest. She had studied Krillian anatomy for months. She knew where their joints were weak. She knew where their armor had gaps, but knowing something and actually facing it were completely different things. Jake grabbed her arm as she passed. "Amy, this is crazy. He's going to hurt you badly." "No, he won't," Amy replied. "Trust me." She climbed onto the platform. Gorthak was already there, bouncing slightly on his legs. All 4 of his arms were raised in a fighting position. "Standard rules," Drax announced. "Fight until someone gives up, gets knocked out, or until I stop it. Begin." Gorthak moved fast. Much faster than something his size should be able to move. 2 of his arms reached for Amy, trying to grab her and end the fight quickly. Amy ducked under the first arm and stepped to the side to avoid the second. Gorthak turned and came after her again. He was fast, but Amy was faster. She dodged 3 more attempts to grab her. "Stop running, human." Gorthak growled. Amy didn't answer. She was watching his movements carefully. She was learning his patterns. Krillians were very strong and well protected, but their joints were vulnerable, and their speed came with a problem. Once they started moving, it was hard for them to stop or change direction quickly. Gorthak lunged again. This time all 4 arms reached out at once in a move that should have been impossible to avoid. Amy dropped flat to the platform and slid under his arms. As she passed under him, she kicked upward. Her foot hit the gap in his armor at his knee joint. There was a cracking sound. Gorthak stumbled just a little bit. It wasn't much, but it was there. The training room went quiet again. But this time no one was laughing. They were surprised. Gorthak turned around. His face looked serious now. "You're faster than you look." He came at her again, but more carefully this time. His attacks were more controlled. He was testing her instead of just trying to overwhelm her. Amy kept moving. She dodged and rolled, staying just out of reach. She was waiting for the right moment. Gorthak was getting frustrated. His movements were becoming less controlled. Then he made a mistake. He reached out too far with two of his arms while his legs were too close together. Amy saw her chance. She stepped inside his reach and used his extended arm as support. Then she swung her whole body and threw a punch with everything she had. Her right fist hit the gap where Gorthak's upper arm connected to his body. The impact was perfect. Every bit of her strength went into that one spot. But something happened that no one expected. The sound was not just from a good hit. It was louder and deeper. The Durasteel platform under Amy's feet cracked. Spiderweb lines spread out from where she was standing. Gorthak didn't just stumble. He flew backward. His arm hung at a wrong angle. His armor was cracked at the point where Amy had hit him. He crashed onto the platform, which cracked even more. He didn't get back up. The entire training room was completely silent. Amy stood there breathing hard. She stared at her own hand in shock. The skin on her knuckles wasn't even scratched. Sergeant Drax walked forward slowly. His eyes were wide. He looked at Gorthak, who was awake but clearly in shock. Then he looked at the cracked platform. Then he looked at Amy. "What was that?" he asked quietly. The medical bay was full of activity and noise. 3 Krillian doctors worked on Gorthak, who was lying on a special table built to hold his weight. The table made creaking sounds under him. His upper right arm was completely out of its socket. Small cracks covered his armor near where Amy had punched him. "This is impossible," one doctor kept saying. "The force needed to crack Krillian armor is enormous. A human shouldn't be able to do this." In another room nearby, Amy sat on an examination table. A doctor named Rin was scanning her hand with different medical devices. Jake, Peter, and Kevin stood close by. They all looked shocked. "There's no damage at all," Dr. Rin said. His 4 eyes blinked rapidly in confusion. "No broken bones, no torn muscles, not even a bruise. It's like you hit a soft pillow, not a Krillian warrior." Amy opened and closed her hand. She was still trying to understand what had happened. "I don't get it either. I've hit training bags before, but nothing like this. Nothing like cracking a military-grade Durasteel platform," Jake said. "Amy, what just happened out there?" Before Amy could answer, the door opened. Sergeant Drax came in, followed by Lieutenant Commander Vexthor and Captain Zinn. All 3 officers looked confused and concerned. "Cadet Brooks," Vexthor said formally, "you're not in trouble, but we need answers. What you just did should be physically impossible for your species." "I don't know what happened, sir," Amy said honestly. "I just threw a normal punch, exactly like I was trained. It felt normal to me." Zinn's tongue flicked in and out rapidly. "Normal? You hit with enough force to hurt a Krillian through his armor and crack Durasteel. Our calculations show you generated between 12,000 and 15,000 units of force. That's almost triple what a Krillian can do. But your strength test showed less than 900 units. "That doesn't make any sense," Kevin said. "The numbers are impossible." Dr. Rin looked at his scanner readings again. Then his eyes went wide. "Commander, what is Earth's surface gravity?" Vexthor checked his datapad. 9.8 meters per second squared. "Why do you ask? And what's the gravity in this facility?" "Standard coalition setting. 8.2 meters per second squared. It's the average comfortable range for most species." Dr. Rin's face changed with excitement. "Don't you see? Humans evolved on a high-gravity world. By coalition standards, Earth's gravity is about 1.2 times standard. These humans have lived their entire lives in higher gravity." "I don't understand," Drax said. "Think of it this way," Dr. Rin explained. He pulled up a holographic display. "Imagine you train your whole life while wearing heavy weights. Your muscles, bones, and heart all develop to handle that extra burden. Then suddenly someone removes the weights. What happens?" Understanding showed on Vexthor's face. "You become proportionally stronger in the lighter environment." "Exactly. But it's not just strength. It's speed, reflexes, endurance, everything. The human body is built for Earth gravity. Put them in lighter gravity, and they're working with less resistance than their bodies were designed for." Amy's mind was racing. That's why the static strength test showed low results. We were just squeezing the handles. "But when I threw the punch, I used my whole body. All the momentum and technique that I trained with in Earth gravity." "Precisely," Dr. Rin said. "Your static strength is still limited by your muscle size, but your dynamic force output, especially when using proper technique in your full body, is much higher than it would be on Earth." Zinn hissed softly. "How did we not know this?" "We reviewed human biology reports. Because those reports were probably done on Earth in Earth gravity," Peter said. "Or they only measured static strength, not combat applications." Vexthor was quiet for a long time, thinking. Doctor, what does this mean? Can all humans do this? In theory, yes. Any human trained in proper combat techniques should see similar benefits. Though I suspect Cadet Brooks's training is particularly good. That punch was remarkably precise, not just powerful. I trained for 2 years specifically for this, Amy said. I studied every species' anatomy, every weakness, every fighting style. I knew we couldn't match raw strength, so I focused on technique, precision, and leverage. And when you combine that technique with the gravity difference, Drax said slowly, you became dangerous. We need to test this properly, Vexthor decided. Controlled environment with full monitoring. If this is true, it changes everything about how we evaluate human combat ability. What about Gorthak? Amy asked with concern in her voice. Is he going to be okay? He'll recover, Dr. Rin said. Krillian bodies are tough, but his pride might be hurt forever. He'll be the first cadet in Academy history to be seriously injured by a species everyone thought was weak. I didn't mean to hurt him that badly, Amy said. I was just trying to prove we could compete. You did more than that, Drax said. There might have been respect in his voice now. You made everyone in that room question what they believed. The next morning, everyone at the Academy had heard what happened. The training arena was packed when Amy and the other humans arrived for the second day. Cadets from all the different training groups had found reasons to be there. Several instructors had joined Sergeant Drax to watch. Quite a crowd, Jake said quietly. No pressure or anything. Amy stepped onto a new platform. This one had been quickly installed to replace the one she had cracked. It was reinforced with extra supports and covered in sensors to measure force. Today's test will be different, Vexthor announced to the crowd. We're going to properly evaluate human combat abilities in a controlled way. Cadet Brooks, you'll face a series of opponents with increasing difficulty. After each match, we'll analyze the data. Are you ready? Yes, sir, Amy replied. Her first opponent was a Quellan scout. They were chosen because they were one of the lighter species, fast and quick but not heavily armored. The match lasted less than a minute. Amy's speed was overwhelming. She moved like lightning, landing 3 precise strikes before the Quellan could adjust his defense. The second opponent was a Sithrak warrior, similar to Captain Zin's species. This match was harder. The Sithrak was incredibly fast and his bite was dangerous. But Amy had studied their fighting style. She knew they relied on speed and expected opponents to be slower. She matched his speed and beat it, using angles and footwork that the Sithrak couldn't predict. Victory in 2 minutes. The third opponent was another Krillian, a female named Thex who was more experienced than Gorthak. Thex was careful, having learned from what happened to her fellow cadet. She used her forearms to create defense zones and attacked carefully. The match went longer, nearly 5 minutes. But Amy was patient. She tested Thex's defense, learning patterns. When she finally struck, it was with the same precision. Thex's armor held, but she gave up immediately after the impact. She didn't want to risk serious injury. By the fourth match, there were no more jokes or dismissive comments. The crowd watched in silent fascination as Amy faced a Draknor warrior, whose crystal skin made him nearly impossible to hurt with regular strikes. Amy adapted. Instead of trying to punch through his defenses, she used throws and leverage. She used the Draknor's own weight against him in the reduced gravity. When he found himself flying through the air, thrown by someone a third his size, everyone understood the implications. After 6 matches and 6 victories, Vexthor called a stop. That's enough data, he announced. Dr. Rin, what's your analysis? The doctor pulled up multiple holographic displays showing force measurements, speed calculations, and energy transfers. The results are clear. In this gravity environment, human dynamic force output exceeds most species when proper technique is used. But it's more than just the gravity advantage. He showed footage of Amy's movements. Notice the efficiency of motion, the precise targeting, the minimal wasted energy. Humans may be weaker in static measurements, but their ability to optimize force through technique is exceptional. That's because we had to be, Peter spoke up. On Earth, humans aren't the strongest species. We don't have claws or armor or venom. We survived because we learned to use tools and technique. We became precision strikers instead of brawlers. Fascinating, Drax said. And all humans have this ability? Jake stepped forward.
Amy's the best of us, but yes.
We all trained in the same way. Want to see? What followed was a demonstration that changed the Academy's understanding of human combat potential. Jake, Peter, and Kevin each faced opponents. While they weren't as dominant as Amy, they all performed far above what their physical assessments had suggested. By the end of the day, the human cadets had gone from being jokes to sources of intense curiosity and respect. 3 weeks had passed since Amy's demonstration in the training arena. The whole atmosphere at Arcturus Prime Academy had changed. Human cadets were no longer treated as weak jokes. Now they were viewed with a mixture of respect and fear. Amy and her companions had settled into a hard routine. Morning physical training, afternoon combat practice, evening tactical studies. Sergeant Drax had personally taken over their instruction. He was fascinated by the challenge of adapting coalition training methods to human fighting style. But not everyone was happy about the humans. Success. Amy was in the Academy's combat library one afternoon. She was studying holographic recordings of Thorian fighting techniques when she heard footsteps approaching. She looked up to see Gorthak and 3 other Krillian cadets standing in the doorway, blocking her way out. Gorthak's arm had healed, though he still wore a support brace. His face was hard to read behind his armor. "Cadet Brooks," he said formally, "I wanted to speak with you." Amy saved her work and stood up. "Go ahead." That day in the arena. The fight between us. I've watched the footage many times. He paused. I was arrogant. I underestimated you because of your size and species. That was foolish, and it cost me injury and honor. You don't need to apologize, Amy said carefully. We all learn lessons eventually. I'm not apologizing, Gorthak replied. I'm stating facts. You defeated me fairly, but there are others who don't see it that way. One of the other Krillians stepped forward. There's a group of senior cadets who believe the humans got an unfair advantage. They say your performance is artificial, helped by environmental factors rather than true skill. That's technically true, Amy admitted. The gravity difference does give us an advantage. But that's not the whole story, is it? Gorthak said. I've watched all your matches. The gravity helps, but your technique is excellent. You would be a strong fighter even without that advantage. Why are you telling me this? Amy asked. The third Krillian spoke up. Because they're planning to challenge you. Not in a regular training match. An honor duel. Amy's stomach tightened. I thought honor duels were only between members of the same species. Technically, yes, Gorthak said. But there's a loophole in the rules. If a cadet believes their honor or their species' honor has been insulted, they can challenge any other cadet, regardless of species. You can refuse, but refusing would be seen as cowardice and would look bad for all humans in the Academy. Amy finished. Exactly. And the challenger is Drexnar, a 4th-year Krillian who's one of the top combat students in the entire Academy. He believes you embarrassed our species by defeating me, and he wants to prove you got lucky. Amy thought about this. When? Tomorrow night in the auxiliary training hall. It will be unofficial but witnessed. If you lose, it gives ammunition to everyone who wants to keep humans out of the military. If you win, Gorthak paused. If you win, you'll have proven beyond any doubt that humans belong here. And if I refuse? Then people will say that humans can only fight when they choose their opponents and conditions. Your success will be called manipulation rather than skill. Amy was quiet for a moment. Why are you helping me? I hurt you. Gorthak's face changed into what she had learned was a Krillian smile. Because you beat me fairly, and because I've come to respect what you're trying to do. My pride was hurt, yes, but watching you fight has taught me more about combat than 2 years of standard training. You use angles I never thought of, techniques that shouldn't work but do. If I can't beat you, I at least want to learn from you. Besides, the third Krillian added, not all of us agree with Drexnar. Some of us think the Academy has become too predictable, training everyone the same way. You humans are different, and that's valuable. Amy looked at each of them. Thank you for the warning. I'll be there. After the Krillians left, Amy stood alone in the library thinking. She had known this moment would come eventually. Her success had been too dramatic, too unexpected. There would always be those who wanted to prove it was luck. She pulled up files on Drexnar. 4th-year cadet, top marks in hand-to-hand combat, strength scores over 7,000. Winner of the last 3 Academy combat tournaments. He was bigger than Gorthak, more experienced, and according to his records, much faster. This wasn't going to be like her other matches. Drexnar wouldn't underestimate her, and he would be fighting to prove a point, not just to win. Amy spent the next day preparing. She trained with Jake, Peter, and Kevin, working through different scenarios and strategies. She reviewed everything she knew about advanced Krillian combat techniques. She meditated, getting herself ready mentally. Sergeant Drax found her in the training room that evening. "I heard about the challenge," he said. "Directly, news travels fast. Everything involving humans travels fast here these days. You're the most talked about cadets in Academy history." Drax came closer. "You don't have to do this, you know. Honor duels are a tradition, but they're not required. If I don't, it undermines everything we've done. And if you lose, then we'll deal with that when it happens. But I don't plan to lose." Drax studied her with his multiple eyes. Drexnar is very skilled. He stayed at the Academy by choice, preferring to perfect his technique here. He's beaten opponents who have gone on to become decorated combat veterans. I know. Your confidence is good, but this is different from your previous matches. Those were demonstrations and assessments. This is personal. He will be trying to hurt you. Amy met his gaze steadily. "Sergeant, I appreciate your concern, but humans have been fighting our entire existence, against predators, against each other, against environments that wanted to kill us. We learned to be strategic because we had to be. I've studied Drexnar's technique. I know his patterns, and I know mine." Drax was silent for a moment. Then he made a gesture that Amy had learned meant approval. "Then I'll see you tomorrow night. And Cadet Brooks, show them what humans are really capable of." The next evening, the auxiliary training hall was packed. Word had spread through unofficial channels, and nearly 100 cadets from all years and species had gathered to watch. Even some instructors were present, though they pretended this was just a spontaneous gathering rather than a planned event. Amy entered the hall with Jake, Peter, and Kevin. The crowd parted, and she could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her. Some curious, some supportive, many hostile. At the center of the hall stood Drexnar. He was huge even by Krillian standards, easily 9.5 feet tall. His armor looked thick and strong. His forearms moved in constant motion, warming up with complex patterns that showed incredible coordination. "The human arrives," Drexnar announced. His voice carried through the hall. "I was told you accepted my challenge. I'm pleased. It would have been disappointing if you had run away." Amy walked to the center of the hall, stopping about 10 feet from the Krillian warrior. "I'm here. Let's finish this." "So eager to be defeated?" Drexnar laughed. "You beat Gorthak because he underestimated you. He fought like you were just another training dummy. I will not make that mistake." A senior cadet stepped forward to act as referee. "This is an honor duel between Cadet Drexnar of Krillia and Cadet Amy Brooks of Earth. The duel continues until someone gives up, gets knocked out, or a clear winner is established. Medical help is standing by. Begin when ready." Amy took her stance, a modified version of the techniques she had learned, adapted for her body and the reduced gravity. She breathed slowly, focusing herself. Drexnar moved first, but not with a charge or aggressive attack. Instead, he circled, all forearms raised in a defensive position that also allowed for quick strikes. He was being cautious, careful. Amy mirrored his movement, circling in the opposite direction. She watched his foot placement, the position of his shoulders, the small adjustments in his arm positions. He was looking for an opening, testing her defense. The first exchange came fast. Drexnar struck with his upper left arm in what looked like a real attack, but then his lower right arm came at her fast. It was a combination designed to split her attention. Amy had seen this pattern in the recordings. She avoided the fake attack and deflected the real strike, using its force to create distance between them. "Good," Drexnar said. "You've studied, but knowledge and actual combat are different things." He attacked again, this time with a more complex combination. 3 arms struck from different angles while the 4th prepared to grab. Amy dodged 2 strikes and blocked the 3rd with her forearm, accepting the impact rather than trying to match his strength. The 4th arm's grab came exactly where she expected. She trapped the grabbing arm against her body and used it as an anchor point. Then she drove her knee into the joint where Drexnar's lower left arm connected to his body. The Krillian made a sound but didn't let go. Instead, he used his superior strength to lift Amy off the ground, planning to throw her. But Amy had expected this too. As she left the ground, she hooked her other leg around Drexnar's arm and twisted her entire body. The leverage was wrong for Drexnar to counter, and suddenly he was off balance. They both went down in a tangle of limbs. Drexnar recovered first. His extra arms let him push back to his feet faster than Amy could. He struck down at her with a powerful blow that would have been devastating if it had connected. Amy rolled away. The strike missed by inches and cracked the floor where she had just been. She came up in a crouch, breathing hard. The crowd was silent, watching with complete focus. "You're better than I expected," Drexnar admitted, "but this ends now." He came at her with everything. A full assault using all four arms in a pattern that was both beautiful and terrifying. High strikes, low strikes, grabs, and impacts came from every direction at once. Amy moved like water, flowing between the attacks. She deflected what she couldn't dodge, using minimal movements for maximum effect. But Drexnar was relentless, and slowly Amy was being pushed back. Her defense was being tested to its limits. Then Drexnar made his mistake. In his aggression, he put too much into a high strike with his upper right arm. It was his favorite power move according to the recordings Amy had studied. Amy didn't dodge. Instead, she stepped inside the blow, accepting a glancing hit to her shoulder rather than trying to avoid it completely. The pain was immediate and sharp, but she had positioned herself exactly where she needed to be. Her right fist drove upward into the gap in Drexnar's armor, where his chest met his lower left arm socket. Every ounce of her body weight, all her momentum, every technique she had practiced for 2 years, all focused into one perfect strike. The impact echoed through the hall. Drexnar's eyes went wide. His armor cracked loudly, and then, like a falling tree, he toppled backward and crashed to the floor. The hall erupted in noise. Some cadets shouted in disbelief, others in triumph. Amy stood over Drexnar, breathing hard. Her shoulder hurt badly, but nothing was broken. The senior cadet acting as referee approached carefully. "Do you submit, Drexnar?" The Krillian warrior lay still for a moment. Then slowly he raised one arm in the traditional gesture of giving up. "I submit." "She has won." Amy offered her hand to help him up. After a moment's hesitation, Drexnar took it. He let her help him to his feet despite how strange it looked for someone her size to help someone his size. "You are exceptional," Drexnar said quietly, so only Amy could hear. "I see now why Gorthak respects you. You fight not with strength alone, but with intelligence and precision. That is a true warrior's skill." "You're pretty exceptional yourself," Amy replied honestly. "I've never faced anyone that skilled. If you had been just a little less aggressive on that final combination, I don't know if I could have found an opening. Then we both learned something." Drexnar straightened as much as his cracked chest armor allowed. Then to Amy's surprise, he turned to the assembled crowd and spoke loudly. "I challenge this human to prove our species superior. Instead, she has proven that combat excellence is not about size or strength alone. It is about skill, strategy, and the will to keep going. Amy Brooks of Earth has earned her place among us." Let no one question it again. The hall fell silent. Then slowly, a Draknor cadet began making clicking sounds with his claws in a gesture of respect. Another joined, then another. Within moments, the entire hall erupted in approval from dozens of different species, each showing respect in their own way. Amy stood at the center, exhausted and in pain, but feeling something she hadn't felt since arriving at the academy. Acceptance. 6 months later, everything had changed. Amy sat in a command briefing room, now wearing the rank marks of a senior cadet. She had earned it 3 months ahead of schedule. Around her sat the other members of Training Group 7, including Gorthak and Drexnar, who had requested to work more closely with the humans. Lieutenant Commander Vexithor stood at the front of the room. Sergeant Drax and Captain Zinn were with him. A holographic display showed a tactical scenario in 3 dimensions. "This is your final test," Vexithor announced. "A simulated combat scenario that has defeated the last 12 training groups that tried it. You'll face a mixed-species enemy force in a complex urban environment with limited resources." "How is this different from a standard exercise?" asked Thex, the Krillian female. "Because this time the humans are designing the plan," Drax replied. "And the rest of you are going to follow their lead." There was no protest, no complaints. 6 months ago, the idea of non-humans following human plans would have been laughable. Amy stepped forward. "We've reviewed the scenario. Traditional coalition tactics focus on establishing strength through direct combat. That's how the previous groups failed. They tried to overpower the enemy force," she changed the display. "But humans learned warfare differently. We were often the weaker force, so we developed tactics based on deception, indirect approaches, and using the environment. Jake took over. We're splitting into 3 teams. The first team, led by Gorthak, will execute what looks like a standard frontal assault. This will draw the enemy's attention and resources. While they're committed to that, Peter continued, Team 2, led by Drexnar, will move through maintenance tunnels that weren't accessible to larger species. They'll come up behind enemy lines. And Team 3, Kevin finished, led by Amy, will use vertical movement to access the upper levels of these structures. Most coalition forces don't think about vertical attacks because most species don't climb as well as humans in reduced gravity. It's a 3-way attack using deception, infiltration, and vertical movement, Amy concluded. The enemy will have to divide their attention across 3 unexpected threats. The plan worked perfectly. The simulation that usually took 45 minutes was completed in 15, with 0 losses. The instructors were shocked. What you just did shouldn't have worked, Vexthor said. But it did, because you didn't fight the way we expected. You created something new by combining human thinking with the abilities of other species. He straightened. Training Group 7, you are all promoted to Special Operations status. You'll be the first integrated tactical unit in Coalition Defense Force history. 3 weeks later, Amy stood in the deployment bay of a Coalition cruiser. She wore full combat armor, modified for human bodies but incorporating Coalition technology. Jake, Peter, and Kevin stood nearby. Around them were Gorthak, Drexnar, Thex, and the others. Nervous? Jake asked. Terrified, Amy admitted. Training is one thing. Actual combat is something else. We'll be fine, Peter said. We've got each other. Amy looked at her unit. 6 months ago, they had seen humans as weak and unsuitable. Now they were heading into real combat together, trusting each other with their lives. The ship jumped to faster-than-light travel, carrying them toward their first real mission. Whatever waited for them, they would face it together. Human strategy combined with alien abilities, creating something entirely new. In the halls of Arcturus Prime, new cadets would study their methods. Throughout the galaxy, the idea that humans were too weak for military service had become a lesson about underestimating opponents. Sometimes the ones who look fragile turn out to be made of steel. And sometimes a single punch can crack more than just the ground. It can shatter every wrong belief about strength.